Okay.
Alrighty, everyone. Hello and welcome to this month's APTA Student Social on paving the way for women in the PT profession. Happy Women's History Month. My name is Tyler Atkinson, and I serve on the APTA's Student Assembly Board of Directors in the role of nominating committee member. We have a wonderful group of panelists for you all this evening who are excited to answer your questions. Before we get started, here are a few house rules. Please keep your microphones muted at all times unless you are asking a question. To ask a question, you may either raise your hand or send them to me in the chat, but we want this event to be as interactive and as social as possible, so the people with their hands raised will get preference for questions first. If you feel comfortable, please turn off your camera. And at the end of the event, we will go into smaller breakout rooms. There you have a chance to ask any further questions to our panelists if they can stick around, but you also have the chance to network and interact with your fellow attendees. Now, I'm honored to introduce this wonderful group of panelists. First, we have Dr. Tiffany Adams. Dr. Adams.
Hi, good evening. So glad to be here today and engage with you all. I'm Tiffany Adams, faculty member and Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Duke in the Division of Physical Therapy. I'm located in North Carolina. Also serve in a couple of roles at the APT level and for APTA North Carolina on DEI committees. And we're here talking about leadership, which I love. I am a PhD candidate in leadership, so happy to engage in conversations if you have interest in that as well. Thanks again.
Thank you and welcome. Next, we have Dr. Heather Jennings.
Hi, everyone. I am very excited to be here, especially with my panelists. I'm super excited when I saw that we were doing this together. I practice out of the Department of Veterans Affairs Hospital in Boston in neurology, but recently switched into a supervisory role. I serve on APTA's board of directors, and I am also pursuing a master's in public health, so just can't get enough learning.
Awesome, thank you. And finally, we have Dr. Rupal Patel.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. And I'm also very honored and excited to be here with both Dr. Adams and Dr. Jennings, two fabulous women that I look up to and admire. And I am in Houston, Texas. I am a faculty member in the School of Physical Therapy at Texas Women's University on the Houston campus. And I have served at the APTA level on the National Nominating Committee, and I'm involved in state level with our DEI task force, as well as some academies and sections, especially advocacy related and social justice related stuff I'm passionate about. I'm chair of the advocacy committee for ANPT, the Academy of Neuro PT as well. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, everyone. We're excited to have you all here. All right, for our first question, we all know that mentorship is huge for everyone, especially for students and people just starting out in physical therapy. So our first question is, what is one tip you have for students seeking a mentor in the field of physical therapy? Dr. Adams, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. So I'd say I always recommend that you choose really thoughtfully when you're thinking about who might serve as mentors. It's really important to understand, one, what areas of development you're looking at and how a mentor might be able to help you, so that when you go to them and ask them to mentor you, you're clearly able to discuss what you hope that they can help you with. But to be clear on that, you really have to start to think about where your gaps are or where your opportunities for development and growth are. And as you're looking at that individual or trying to decide which individuals might help best you meet those goals, you want to make sure that their skill set, their knowledge, their expertise actually aligns with the gaps or the opportunities that you've identified within yourself. And then I think the last thing is, it's important to remember that mentorship should be mutually beneficial. So as you're thinking about asking someone to mentor you, already start to think about what they gain from it, whether it's furthering their leadership development, or maybe there's a skill set that you have that they could tap into. And so if you can articulate that as well, when you ask people to mentor you, it really helps to get their commitment and interest as well.
I'd love to add to that, that I think mentorship doesn't always have to be formal. And sometimes early on in your professional career, it's just showing up in the places that you have a passion or interest, and whether that's a SIG meeting or that's a certain work group in your department that you're working in, or in your school program. If there's something that just kind of pulls you in and you gravitate to it, keep showing up and meeting those people. And you probably will start to notice that people start to tap you on the shoulder and start to say, I see this skill in you, or I see this passion in you. That's the thing that I look for in a mentor, is somebody who's looking at what my strengths are and how to help me build them, not to help me be more like them. So that's something that I would be on the lookout to make sure that they're not trying to make me something that I'm not, but seeing where I could be successful and helping to just give me a little support and boost into that direction.
Yeah, I agree with both what you both have said. I think that one of the things that I also think about when I think about mentorship is that it doesn't have to be the same people throughout your career. When I think about my career in physical therapy, mentors that I had when I was in your shoes as a student, were different because my needs and what I wanted to be able to accomplish in the first few years of my career were different. And then as I got into clinical stuff, and then I needed more, mentors that were clinical mentors and that not. And then when I started evolving into getting into leadership positions or serving in different things, then I wanted mentors that, would help me grow in those areas. And so, yes, you could have a couple of people that are your go-to people throughout your career. And I think all of us would probably say we have those folks, but also just be thinking about what do you need now, in terms of mentorship. And then as that changes, this networking, whether you're doing this through student members, as you all are now, and then as you grow as clinicians and as advocates and as leaders, like seeking out, folks and being able to kind of, just ask. I think the biggest thing is we're afraid sometimes to ask for mentorship, and especially I think early, all of us have a bit of that imposter syndrome. I know I still struggle with that sometimes. And I think that, the hardest thing is to just ask, and I think if you ask someone, hey, I'm looking for this, is this something you can assist me with, help me with, mentor me with? And if that person has the time and bandwidth, they'll say yes. And if they say no, don't take that as a personal thing that, oh my God, I'm not worthy of mentorship. If they say no, I think that's a good thing, because the person who says no, they know what it takes to be a mentor. And if they don't have the bandwidth to do it, then, that's okay. And if that happens, I would say, can you recommend someone? Yeah, if you don't have a list of other folks. So those would be some added tips, that I would say for you guys in your early career as you are now.
Thank you all. That was great advice. So you all three are great examples of leadership within our profession. So the next question is, so what do you all define leadership as, and who or what has inspired you to become a leader? Dr. Jennings, would you like to take this one?
Sure. I can't say that I was ever made a conscious decision to be a leader. I just wanted to help. So the way that I got where I was I heard that they needed volunteers and they needed support. And I said, I'm here and how can I help? And that just kind of kept evolving into where's the next place that I can bring my skills and be useful. And so I think my definition of a leader and leadership is seeing a place that you can contribute and you can help something be better than when you arrived and leave it just a little bit stronger. And also to set the path for the people to come behind you. So not to think that you're the only person that can do this, but as soon as you get in somewhere thinking, okay, who's the next person that I can pull in? And so that they can have this experience, they can bring their voice and their impact, and they can bring 5 more people and continue to just exponentially spread the power of what we're able to accomplish.
Yeah, I think of leadership as a verb and not as a noun. I think it's about actions you take and not about a position that you hold. And I think a lot of times, people automatically assume that if you have a position, you're a leader. But all of us can lead from within. And, whatever you're passionate about, is what you're going to really be something that you can lead on, I think, from within. And so to kind of, think about it from that perspective. And I keep that in mind, and, I watch for those helpers. I feel like the helpers in the crowd are the real leaders. And so to emulate them, that, what are they doing? What are the actions, that they're taking to lead, whether it's a group or with themselves or whatever it is. And so, think of leadership as more of an action rather than a position, and that all of you are empowered to lead, and that you can do it in your own bubble of your community, of your school, of your class, of your group that you're working with on a project, or you can be a leader within the student members of the APTA, within a section, within a chapter, so what are you passionate about and how do you want to lead? Think about that.
Those are really great points offered by both of my colleagues. And I'll just add that when I think about leadership, I just think about someone who influences a group of people to meet a common goal, right? So as Dr. Patel mentioned, we're all leaders in some way, because in different instances, we're that person, right? That is, advocating and rooting each other on and planning and, inspiring each other, to meet whatever that common goal is in our different professional, personal, and social circles. And for me, my drive towards leadership was honestly, premised from what I perceived as a lack of Black female leaders in many of the circles that I was in within the profession. And so my desire to lead is really driven by, wanting the generation behind me to not experience the same void that I experienced as I navigated, the first 5 or so years of my career in PT.
Perfect. Thank you all for that wonderful advice, or that wonderful information. Teo, I believe someone has a question raised. Teo, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you all so far for all the awesome responses. It's been amazing so far just to listen. But I have a question in regards to the leadership component. So as you began to find your ways in leadership and really started to enjoy that aspect and sort of lit a fire under you to continue on, did you ever feel fatigue as you began to become more of a leader? And then if you did, what were some things that you tried to do to help you cope with that?
Do you want to start on that one? We're going round robin. Oh my gosh, definitely. I think that, my biggest hurdle is myself. Sometimes I tend to have a hard time saying no, and especially if it's things that I'm passionate about and that I'm very interested in. But then you get that fatigue because it's like, when do you find the time then to do all that you want to do and are interested in? And so then there comes a time when you have to really self-reflect and kind of say, okay, what can I take off my plate, or what can I put on hold, and then not take on new things. And so I think being intentional in terms of like, what is the space and the bandwidth you have to do the whatever action, role, task in terms of leadership requires, because I think the energy, so much of it is time, but also your energy. And you want to make sure that you're expending energy, but you're also fulfilling. And I think as a leader, I always find when I do something that I am passionate about, that aligns with my values and who I am, I get more out of it than I put into it. And, but what I put into it, then drains me. So I have to be able to fill that cup or fill that energy back again. And so just kind of thinking about those things and being more intentional about that. And I think I'm at a stage in my career now where I love to mentor and to help grow. And so like I serve on the TPTA, the Texas Physical Therapy Association DEI task force, but I'm kind of there to help. And we have, we were intentional in developing the task force with a lot of new professional members, people that had not had leadership roles or on a task force before, but were interested, but weren't sure how to. And so then a couple of us that are on there kind of help provide more the structure and how to go about things, because we've been around, and then let the new generation of folks who have the passion and the interest but need that mentorship kind of take that. So that's very fulfilling, because we are 100 years old as a profession, and I'm excited about that. But it's you all that are going to be pretty much at the helm, in the next 100 years. And so I want to be able to support and boost as much as I can. So that's kind of how I sustain and keep the fatigue down nowadays.
Completely agree with everything you mentioned, Dr. Patel. And, Dr. Jennings alluded earlier to, when you're putting yourself in positions to serve or to meet a need, and you do that well, more opportunities come, right? More and more opportunities come. And so I think part of developing as a leader is understanding and being able to identify when those opportunities either aren't the best for you, or when you aren't the best person for that opportunity. And that, that alignment is so important and so critical. And it's okay to say, I'm not the best person for this opportunity. And I think as you get further along in your career, you realize that you can't say yes to everything, but you shouldn't say yes to everything. And very early, we say yes, like these are great opportunities. Everything is a great opportunity. We need to do it all. But as you grow in your leadership skills, you learn how to really look for that alignment. And that helps too with managing and navigating some of that fatigue.
This question made me chuckle because this week my sister gave me a birthday present that actually, like, the card was printed with, "Aren't you worn out?" And I laughed pretty hard at it. But the thing that helped me to really take a step back from kind of that wheel that Tiffany described of you get pulled in and you keep saying yes and yes and yes. And for a long time I was saying, but I love everything and I really want to keep helping. And somebody pointed out to me that every time I said yes, it meant somebody else who wanted that opportunity couldn't have it. And that immediately helped me to snap out of that, because I had been conscious about thinking about, okay, who's next following behind me? But I was holding on too long to things that they were piling on, and I was getting worn out. So being very intentional as soon as I get in a role, thinking about, okay, who are all the people who have skills and interest and passion to come behind me so I can help, and then get out of the way and let them have that.
Those are all great points. Having a great discussion so far. Thank you, Teo, for that excellent question. Dr. Adams, I think you said great. It's very easy to keep saying yes to those things. So I think that's a great advice. We have another question from our attendees. Renee, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for all the insight so far. You made a lot of excellent points so far. Some of them were, I think, asking someone to be a mentor is the hardest part. And I've struggled with that. And you've pointed out that it doesn't have to be a formal mentor. But if you are looking for a more formal mentor, what is the best way to ask? Is it just, in this part of my professional development, I'm hoping to do this, and I know you have a lot of experience. Could you help me with that? Because I think where I struggle with is, it sounds like a big commitment. Hey, can you be my mentor? Like, that's pretty open-ended.
I think part of it is acknowledging in the ask that the responsibility is on you as the mentee. So a mentor is there to support you and help you to grow, but you as the mentee have to come with what you're looking to get out of it and what your goals are. And you have to be the person that keeps accountable to, okay, here's the next action I'm going to take, or here's the next thing that I'm going to work on and develop. And then I'm going to come back to you and check in, and you can kind of give me guidance on where to go next. So in that way, it's not as big of an ask, because you're not asking them to necessarily outline a plan for you. You're saying this is your goal that you want to get to, and then you're consulting with them, and they're kind of helping to direct you on that path rather than leading it.
I would also add that relationship building is so important. And, even before the ask, I like to spend a lot of time, as much time as possible within the constraints of different things and circumstances with those individuals. Because often the questions that you would ask in that ask, you can kind of get at through just kind of casual conversation with someone. For example, really understanding a person's communication style, really understanding expectations that they would have for you, that you would have for them. Like those things can kind of more casually come about through relationship building, so that when you're identifying that this person actually does align well with you and vice versa, when you make that ask, it doesn't seem like it's just coming from nowhere, and the person isn't shocked at all because that relationship has already been established. So if you haven't taken the time to do that up front, I'd recommend just engaging in conversations with those individuals first to evaluate that alignment before you even ask.
Yeah, that's a great point, the relationship building aspect. And I think, as students, especially, then the question becomes, where do I start that relationship building, right? And what if I'm not in the room where it happens? And that's like from CSM, I had 17 first-year students that went to CSM and about 30 some second-year students. And when we came back and we debriefed on it, the first years were like, oh, I wish I had gone. I wasn't, in the room where it happened, kind of thing. And I'm like, that's okay, because, there's different ways you can reach out, so certainly the relationship building starts when we are back now to face-to-face conferences. But, now we're doing a lot of these online things. And, you guys are the social media generation. And, I have a college age daughter, and so she's in that group. And so, she's expert at stalking people on social media to develop those relationships that Dr. Adams is talking about. And I recall doing that when I was doing my PhD. In my program, we had to come up with our own committee members. And I had read a lot of the research of the people that I admired in the area I was studying, but I didn't know any of them personally. And so kind of thinking about who they were, who do I know? So it was actually one of my DPT students did her undergrad degree at the university where the person I wanted to be my primary mentor was there. And so I actually used my DPT student as as an e-intro, like introduce me to your former professor whose lab you used to work in at that, at your undergrad university. And then that, way. So, relationship building can come from a wide network. And so don't be afraid to use that. And you know what? I mean, also don't be afraid to cold call. I mean, that's the hardest thing to do, but that's sometimes, that could be fruitful. I mean, yes, it could be like, who is this person and why are they contacting me? But if you've done your stalking appropriately and you've seen and like what this person is about and what you want from them, you can introduce yourself that way in your introduction and say, I've been following you, I've seen your work or read your this, and I'm excited about this. And, would you be willing to chat with me or whatnot? And so those are great ways, to reach out, whether through social media, through email, to kind of start building those relationships and then seeing kind of from there, who is it that, maybe that person that you contacted is not the right mentor you need for whatever your need is right now. But guess what? Now you are building a relationship there. And maybe there's a friend of yours who needs that. And then you can kind of connect and plug, and that's important as well.
Thank you again. Another wonderful question. Anybody else who has questions, please feel free to raise their hands. Real quick before we go on to any further questions, we have a brief interruption from our nominating chair member, Sophia Hack, who will make a few announcements about upcoming things happening in the APTA. Sophia?
Thank you, Tyler. So we actually have a lot coming soon in the APTA, so there's going to be quite a few announcements, so bear with me. But on Sunday, April 10th from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we have our APTA Live. It's going to be hosted by our very own Director of Communications, Casey Schlottman. And the topic is Striving for Financial Wellness, with Joe Rinke from FitBucks discussing tips for paying off your loans, budgeting, and generally setting yourself up for financial success. So that's going to be live on the APTA's YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook page, and of course is free to all members. And Taya will drop a link in the chat for more information about that. And then also we have our APTA Reach 100 Student Membership Challenge, which is closing really soon. It ends on March 31st. And this is a challenge that happens every year. It's a contest for physical therapy and PTA education programs. It lasts a month, and any program that enters into the challenge and has 100% APTA membership of their students will receive free access to the new APTA telehealth certificate core courses. And in addition, any student in a participating program will all be automatically entered for one of 8 $100 APTA store gift cards. So link to that will be dropped in the chat. This is especially good if your program requires APTA membership, then like, why not apply, right? And then we have, for students who are about to be new grads, this one is perfect for you guys. The APTA Career Center is holding a resume sweepstakes, which is also closing on March 31st, so coming soon. You upload or update your resume to the APTA Career Center at jobs.apta.org, and you'll be automatically entered to win an APTA store gift card as well, valued at $100 to get yourself some APTA merch, just like you see all our panelists sporting today. And it closes next Thursday, and the 4 winners will be notified by April 10th. So don't wait around on that. And then we also have National Advocacy Dinners coming back in April. They're an annual event usually held locally by programs or student groups to learn about the importance of APTA advocacy and how students can get involved and stay involved throughout their careers. So you can learn the top legislative issues affecting your future profession and patients, and find out how you can get involved and make a difference now as a student advocate. So if you're interested in hosting one of these national advocacy dinners with your program maybe, or just attending one, you can click the link in the chat for more info. And then especially for our PTA students, we have the APTA Social coming soon with the PTA Centennial Scholars. So that's going to be next Sunday, March 27th from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time, with Sean Bagby, Casey Klein, Shelby Melton, and Emily Reynolds discussing what they learned through the Centennial Scholars process. So you can click a link for that as well for more information. And last one, we have the VCU Marquette Challenge event. So join the Foundation for Physical Therapy Research and the VCU Marquette Challenge student coordinators for an interactive panel discussion on what to expect and what your employer will expect from you in your first job out of PT and PTA school. So another good one for our people who are getting ready to graduate in May. So you can get the private practice clinician and academic perspective in this 30-minute webinar, which will be held on Monday, March 28th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So not this Monday, but next Monday. And again, that link is in the chat. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sophia. A ton of great opportunities to take advantage on within the APTA, a lot of exciting things coming up. Alrighty, so all of our panelists today have shirts on that say founded by women, because as we know, the APTA and the PT profession were founded by women and have been moved along, and the profession has been moved along since. Our next question for our panelists is, who has been your biggest influence in PT? So we'll start with maybe Dr. Adams.
My biggest influence has been Dr. Kim Bernardo. If you don't know her, she is the founding program director for the College of St. Mary's new DPT program. But more important than that, she is an amazing leader in that role and external to that role. She has just been a major contributor, and I call it a board of directors. Is kind of what I call my mentorship team, because I have different people who mentor me in different areas of my professional and personal development. And she's also one of my committee members for my dissertation. But she challenges my thinking, and she asks questions in a way that almost makes me second guess my thought process and my decision making, but in a very positive way, like in a very necessary way. And I think what I appreciate most about her is the fact that I always leave conversations with her, just kind of reevaluating my initial thought process. And I think as human beings, we need that because we are creatures of habit. We are products of our environments, and sometimes our thought processes are void of perspective. And so I really appreciate just the thoughtfulness and the intentionality in which she asks questions for me. And so she's been someone that has been paramount to my development as a leader in physical therapy. And if you don't know her, you should. She's phenomenal. She's an amazing woman.
I'm going to pick three because I feel very fortunate that I have like this powerhouse team of women in Massachusetts who, kind of to Renee's question earlier, like I didn't know that they were going to become mentors, but they did. One is the past president of Massachusetts before I served as president, Mary Zupkis. And the first time I showed up to a meeting, I sat at a table by myself and she immediately called me over and said, "What are you doing? Come sit over here." And just her boldness and the way that she asked questions, like Tiffany was saying, her, Colleen Keegan, and Cindy Zadai, who are both past APTA board members, when I'm in a room with them, it fascinates me how they think about the world and our profession and the potential that it can have. And I hope that someday my brain can work in a way that can think of so many possibilities at one time. So they are definitely all of my inspirational mentors.
Yeah, I hesitated after Dr. Adams because I'm like, I don't know if I can pick just one. I think that when I was in PT school, I had someone on faculty that was my mentor and always had my back. And I was not a straight A student in PT school. I was a B student and I was involved in a lot of things. And I always felt like, why am I not making better grades? And I remember my mentor, Dr. Tutti Overby, and she always said, you are enough. And that was one of those things that really stuck with me, because I think as women, especially, we kind of get into this, like, are we enough? And we have so many roles that we want to fulfill. And there are times in my life where I feel like I'm not good at anything because I'm trying to be, be a woman. I'm trying to be a wife, a mother, a daughter, a professor, a professional, all these roles, and so just keeping in mind that you are enough, I think was some advice that I got early and that helped me. And I think professionally, probably the reason why I became a member of the APTA, I've been a member since 1988, and it's because of Dr. Janet Besner. And Dr. Besner is just an amazing woman and leader. And I was fortunate. She was a leader in the Texas chapter when I was a new grad in 1990, 1991, and pulled, it drew me in, inspired me, and then I was fortunate to have her as a professor in my PhD program. And it's just someone that, I always look up to, and it's kind of my litmus test sometimes of what I aspire to be, and that kind of thing. And I think just personally who I connect with, and I developed this friendship through APTA, and my connection with APTA is Dr. Eva Norman, who's a private practice clinician in Minnesota. And Eva and I are like, I always say we're sisters from, two different mothers, and we're soul sisters because we just, I have such a admiration and respect for her, and I can tell her anything and say anything, and she kind of is my mirror, in terms of, and she tells me like it is. And, I love that about her. And I have, known Eva the least in terms of the last probably 10, 15 years. Dr. Overby, like I said, I've known since 1989, and Dr. Besner probably since 1989 as well. And there's so many others, as I went through my career, that I take inspiration from a lot of people. They fill me, and my cup and what I want to continue to aspire to be. So those would be my three, but there's so many more than that.
Thank you all. As we said in the beginning, having mentors is huge, and having people to look up to as you go on your journey is paramount. So thank you all for sharing that. That was great. The next question is a little bit deeper. So if you guys are open to sharing, have you ever experienced discrimination as a woman in the workplace? If you have, how would you recommend navigating similar situations? I'll leave this open to whoever would like to take it.
Wow, that's a tough one. It's one of those areas that well, my answer is yes. I have. And I think it's a tough one to talk about because I think as women and, intersectionality for me is I'm a woman, I'm Asian Indian, I'm an immigrant, and so there's a lot of, when you talk about discrimination that could come at you from any one or a combination of those angles. And I think the lessons I learned about discrimination come from my parents and my grandparents. And I think when I immigrated to America, which was a long time ago, when I was in the 6th grade, assimilation was a big thing. So you blend in, you don't stand out, you just be like everyone else. And so, and then it won't be as bad, and I think that's the advice that I got. And that's kind of what I did a lot. It wasn't until my daughter was a teenager and when she started asking questions about, Mom, who am I? Am I American? Am I Indian? Am I Texan? When people ask me where you're from, well, I was born and raised in Texas. So, and then if people leadership roles, she was on the marching band and on the drum line, which was all male, and she was the only female as a 9th grader that made the drum line. And so there was just a lot of questions she started asking me that made me introspect and kind of think about like, is what I'm doing in terms of just assimilating and letting it roll off my back, is that the example I want now for the next generation? Or do I want to speak up more? And do I want to advocate more? And so I think that, I switched that light bulb or whatever switch went on probably, about 7-8 years ago, like I said, when she was kind of in her teen years and kind of talking through some of that. So I feel like I'm a little bit more vocal in those areas now and than I was before. And, it still is not easy. And especially when you feel like you have had microaggressions that have been lobbed at you from people that you admire and respect. That's probably my hardest, to be able to talk to someone who I admire and respect, who may have unintentionally done or said something which I have allowed to roll off my back for 10, 15 years. And now it's like, how do I respond? How do I handle that? So, speaking up more, but also, being able to sometimes not stay silent, but knowing when, and is it appropriate in every instance? And if it is, do I have the energy to make the waves and to see it through? And so those are things I have to like really decide on versus like just saying, every human being has good in them. And even though they're discriminating against me, I look for what is good in them so that I can relate to them on that level to help me kind of get past whatever it is that, I'm experiencing. And other times, yes, calling people out. So that's a very long answer. Sorry.
That was great. Thank you for sharing.
Dr. Patel, I appreciate that transparency. And, I think about Maya Angelou's quote saying, when you know better, you do better, right? So, you navigated it in the way that you knew to navigate it. And when you knew differently, you started to navigate it differently. And I think that's probably the journey of many of us in different ways. When I think about experiences that I've had with discrimination in the workforce, the way I try to navigate them is thinking about my values and who I am. And if instances really, are against those core values of who I am, I feel like it is very expensive for me. And when I say expensive, I mean, there's going to be a cost, whether it is, I'm not okay with myself, I'm not feeling comfortable, safe, empowered in this environment, or maybe the cost is at the expense of other individuals who might be impacted by me not saying something. And so if that situation that I'm experiencing really challenges my values, and for me, one of my core values is justice. So a lot of discriminatory instances are going to go against justice in some way, then I have to say something. I can't sleep at night if I don't. And so my thought process is at that point is not if I'm going to say something, it's what am I going to say and when am I going to say it, right? Because something has to be said. So lead with your values. And when something really goes against your core values of who you are as a person, you might find that you have to do something about it.
I can't agree more with what both of you had said. And I think the topic of microaggressions is really important to highlight because so many times the discrimination is something that seems so small, but internally, like we feel it so strong and we could carry that burden around into the feeling of I am not enough. The more that we kind of just go through life and let those things brush off and don't address them, the harder it is to overcome that feeling of I am enough. And then as you start to mentor and help develop others, the same way that Rubel was sharing about her daughter, like you don't want other people to experience that. You want to create a better environment for the people around you and the people coming behind you. So it gives you a little bit of I know for me, it's easier to address it from that perspective because otherwise I'm like, oh, it's just me, it's fine. But then when I think about the impact it's going to have on others and how it could negatively affect their growth and how they feel comfortable in the workplace or in leadership positions. I mean, I've had it happen in APTA as well. So coming from that perspective and also doing it in a questioning way. And so not necessarily assuming that the person is having a malicious intent, but just asking them questions or expressing how it made me feel to hear that or to experience that. And for me, sometimes, like Tiffany said, it's later because I need time to process things. And so finding the right way to navigate back where it feels safe for me to approach that situation and to feel like I can move it forward.
Thank you all for that. That was very powerful. I know it's an easy question to answer, and these are very real issues in our society. And I think we all gained a lot from your insights. So thank you all very much for taking that question. Just want to point out there to the group, we are getting close to about 15 minutes left of our event, about 10 to the hours, and we're going to get into our breakout rooms. So please, if you have any further questions, please send them in the chat or raise your hand. But I see we actually have a hand raised right now from the gallery. So the floor is yours.
Is it the person with the hand raised flags?
Yes, so that's a summary.
MreyaLgin.
Hi, thank you. It's a great discussion. Thank you so much. I want to ask that, like, is equal pay is a worldwide issue. APTA has any research on are we paid equally as a women physical therapist? Or how
about pay, gender pay? Yes, that's the question. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, that's not just a APTA thing, right? Or PT thing. Gender parity and pay is an issue in just about every field, I think, in our country. And I can't speak for everywhere around the world, but I think that's going to take a lot of different sectors and women from all walks of life advocating, empowering, speaking up. And, that's the kind of discrimination to really call out, because if you don't have economic parity as a woman, that's going to limit you in a lot of ways. And so I think too many times, even us as women have been okay with that, like, oh, and we don't fight for ourselves, in terms of that pay, gender pay equality. And we should, like, I tell my new grads, like, don't accept whatever offer they give you, and if they say this is our standard for every new grad, I'm like, well, tell them what be realistic, but tell them what you think you're worth and what extra you bring to the table. And they could still say no, push. And maybe they still say no, but you know what? Now they know that this is a new graduate, a woman that is going to stand up for herself, and it is someone who has put thought in it. And then maybe it's like, okay, once my probationary period is over, 3 month or 6 month, let's have that conversation. If they feel like, well, you're an unknown, we don't know your work ethic, we don't know this about you, we don't know your skill set, we don't know how quickly you're going to be able to pick up a full caseload, do all those things. I'm like, okay, well, give me a timeline, 3 months, 6 months, a year, and then let's have this conversation again. And so when women do that, we are empowering ourselves, but society looks at that as, oh, here's a pushy broad, right? And especially, and then if it's a minority woman, it's even, it's like, the names we get called are very different sometimes, and so, but that's what's needed. And I really feel like that, and those of you that, identify as men, I think men are our biggest allies. And so if you're a man and who values gender parity, then I challenge you and empower you to stand up for your female colleagues. I mean, look at our shirts, founded by women. Yet, yes, even in physical therapy, we don't have that gender parity. And it's going to take all of us to fight for that, and not just those that feel minoritized in terms of pay, but all of us. Because if we support each other, that'll lift all of us up, when it comes to gender parity.
All right, thank you. I believe we actually have another hand raised. In the chat, Fosa, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the words that you guys have been sharing today. So I have 2 questions. One of them is, with what you know now, what would you have done differently within your career? And then the other question that I have is, hold on, I wrote it down, was that what advice would you give us new PT, well, women who are in the PT profession and those of us who are starting our career, what should we be looking at when we're trying to navigate the profession in order to create the career that we desire?
Not small questions. So I think I'm going to kind of combine both answers as far as what you're looking to create for your career. I wouldn't change anything that I did. I say all the time that I consistently found myself in places I didn't expect to be. And how wonderful that was to be able to learn from those experiences, whether they were positive or negative, and to be in rooms with people that I either related to or didn't relate to, and to take from each of those experiences what was the next right thing that I wanted to do, or what was the next right skill that I wanted to develop, or from those individuals I interacted with, what did I want to emulate and bring into myself and my core values, and what did I see really did not align, and I knew I needed to shift away from those things. So I think in looking to what do you want to build for your career, find the next right step for you, but be open to that. You probably don't know where that's going to end. You have an idea, but be willing to explore and to change directions. And it's not always a sharp turn, but it just tends to veer in a way that you maybe didn't think, and be willing to follow that.
I'd add that your career is yours. So it is an individualized pathway. And I don't think I really understood that in the way that I do now. In the first couple of years of my career, I was very much driven by other people's pathways and what other people told me the pathways were potentially, versus really looking in the mirror and having a conversation with myself and saying, you know, if the barriers that you perceive as barriers were not barriers, what would you be doing? What would that look like? And that was a conversation I had with myself a couple of years ago. And it was extremely helpful, because my pathway, I don't perceive it to be, you know, similar to many of the individuals that I, you know, spend time with and communicate with, and yours may not be either, and that's okay. And I think that if I had heard someone tell me that sooner, it would have been really helpful versus me having to come to that conclusion much later in my career. So that would be what I offer to you: is your career is your career, your journey is your journey, and don't be disabled by other people's journeys and them telling you what yours can or cannot be.
Yeah, you know, I agree with both of these wonderful women here. You know, I feel like I'm one of those that's kind of a very few regrets in life kind of person, because everything you experience in life, you know, I think there's a quote like experience is the best teacher, but, you know, I think your best lessons come from your failures as well as what didn't go as well as you planned. And when you had to wing it and it worked or it didn't work. And so all of that kind of makes you who you are and will help develop you in the future. So I think those past experiences, good or bad, shape who you are and you know, shape who you're going to be. So you know, if you're going to regret something, then, you know, regret it for a little bit, but not for a whole long time, because that will probably drag you down a little bit or slow you down. And you don't want that. You know, you want the light and the positive energy and not kind of that the negativity of what could have been, should have been, would have been, you know, versus what can be. And so, you know, always think about what can be and what can I take away from that and what can I make of it.
Thank you all so much for your statements, and also thank you to everyone who wrote in the group, in the chat. Those were awesome points. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that question. And actually, we have time for one more question. We have one more hand raised. Catherine, the floor is yours.
Hi, panelists. Thank you for your words. My question is, how do you suggest mentoring others with disabilities, especially those with a strong skill set and passion for what they do, but they can't show up in the traditional ways as their more able-bodied and neurotypical peers, so as to not push them out of spaces for advancement?
So are you thinking like PTs, patients, or everyone, or
I'd say really everyone from just a mentor perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I'm a neurotherapist just at heart. I started in brain injury and spinal cord injury rehabilitation at TIER a long time ago. And I think, you know, the biggest thing with empowering my patients, and especially folks that were young at 16, 20 year, you know, age range with TBI and with spinal cord injury, is exposing them to others who have flourished, you know, in life after rehab. And so they can see someone like them that is living a fulfilling life and with the disability. And I think that's something that I still do as an educator, as I have my students experience kind of community-based, you know, what it's like living in the community with a disability, so that they can empower their patients in that regard. So yeah, exposing my patients to others who are, you know, living in fulfilled lives. And I think in terms of people with disabilities that want to be physical therapists, like students and people with disabilities that are physical therapists, I think in the settings that I've been in, and again, it's been in that neuro rehab settings. And so I have worked with physical therapists with different disabilities. And I think in that setting, it's been very supportive. So I haven't encountered where the person hasn't felt supported. In fact, one of my friends who actually comes and lectures with my students, she's a physician. And when she was in medical school, she fell and broke her neck. And so she has a, she's a wheelchair user, but she switched, she reframed from doing med peds to radiology. And she's been a physician now for probably 20 plus years. And so just having someone like her talk about her experience to empower students to new professionals, I think is helpful. And then all the things that she had to navigate to that weren't always easy, and then the lessons that she learned. So those are some things that I've done personally or known of in terms of empowerment and kind of making sure that people with disabilities, get the resources and the help that they need to be able to fulfill and function, in whatever role they're in.
I think as a mentor, we can pull on what feels comfortable as PTs. So I always share the example of when I have a patient who I'm going to put on body weight supported treadmill training, for example. When I go into that session, I'm thinking about how much am I going to offload them? What speed am I going to set the treadmill at? Is the room going to be an open or closed environment? Am I going to have a second person assisting? Am I going to have eSTEM? Am I going to have AFOs? What are all the things that I'm going to pull into this session that the patient doesn't even need to think about, so that when they get into that room, all I need to say to them is walk, because I've controlled all of these things to make it as optimal as a place for them to thrive, because I'm pulling in just enough challenge to help them, to push them to grow. But I've controlled for the things that I think are going to be holding them back, where they'd feel like they're failing if I didn't otherwise do that. And so that's how I view working with my staff, or working with the residents that I work with, or anybody that I view in mentoring APTA, is what is that environment that I'm creating around them so that they can be in their strength, but have enough challenge that they can feel successful and they grow, and that they're not staying in the same place. And then I keep thinking, okay, what's the next thing that I'm going to kind of adjust or tweak? And it's not just taking something wildly away, it's making a small change to keep them having that little push to grow in the right challenge level. An awesome question.
Yes, phenomenal question. And I echo what both of my colleagues are saying. That the only thing I'll add is that often there's another layer of mentorship that involves navigating structures. So a lot of times the barriers that our colleagues, our patients, our peers are navigating, particularly when they have disabilities, there are these structures that they need help navigating to. And I think that's something that we don't pay as much attention to for in mentorship relationships, perhaps with those without disabilities, that we have to be much more intentional about as well. So it's not just the environment when they're with us during that time, but how are you challenging the structures and the systems that are going to work against them in the real world as they're seeking advancement as well, and helping them have the tools and resources to be able to do that as well is really important.
Thank you all.
And thank you.
So sorry. Thank you for that question. Thank you to our panelists. We are just about out of time. So I just want to take this time to say thank you to this wonderful trio of panelists. I think we were all very inspired from all of the information you guys gave and the experience you've all provided. My last questions for all of you is, if someone had a question in the group that they didn't get to ask this evening, what's a good way to contact you all?
I'll put my email in the chat. I can be reached via email or
Yeah, you can, I'm on Twitter as well as you can email me. So I put my email in my chat as well. And, don't be afraid to cold call, like I said, you can practice with me if you want, and I won't bite. But, I'd love to be able to connect you to, if I'm not the right person, to others and help any of you grow. It's wonderful that you guys are all here on a Sunday night to attend this panel. That says a lot about all of you. And so just wonderful to see the next generation of leaders that are ready to take on, take us into the next century. So thank you.
It's always really special to be a part of APTA events, and I appreciate you asking the three of us. I know I was super excited when I saw that I was doing this with Tiffany and Rupal, and I thank you all for your questions. And I completely agree that we are all here anytime you have a question, and don't be afraid to cold call us, like Rupal said, and we would be happy to share our networks and help connect you if we can do that in any way.
Absolutely. Thank you all for your great questions. And our future is bright with you all. The future of our profession is very bright.
Thank you all, and thank you for providing your information. Thank you all for coming, and I hope you all have a great night.
All right. Have a good night. Bye.